Through the lens of the chosen topics, violence and gender/sexuality, I'll examine Platinum Games' Bayonetta 2, released in 2014, and to some extent, the first Bayonetta title released in 2009. The reason behind examining two games instead of just one is because once we reach the topic of gender and sexuality, we will also be examining Bayonetta's character than the game itself, and thus being able to refer to both games will aid in the analysis. Before diving into the analysis, let's answer an important question first. What is Bayonetta? Bayonetta and its sequel are what people like to call a character action game. Other games that fall under that subgenre include Ninja Gaiden and Devil May Cry. Essentially, these games are stylish beat-em-ups, meaning they're heavily focused on combat. However, instead of playing like, say, a Musou where you have 1,000 enemies at once and can mindlessly output combos until everything has been defeated, character action games require a high level of manual dexterity and strategy to approach enemies to be somewhat competent at. Usually players have an access to a large variety of tools and moves at their disposal at any one time, keeping combat largely diverse and fluid. In video games, players need some sort of challenge that they can overcome. It's part of the fundamentals of gaming. An easy obstacle for players to overcome is conflict. An obvious form of conflict is a bad guy does something, so we must stop him. And this is where violence shows itself in gaming, whether it be Mario crushing small mushroom people with his suede boots, or Master Chief punching and pumping aliens full of justice and lead. Violence in gaming is inescapable. So, are there instances of violence in the two Bayonetta titles? Yes, a lot of them. As mentioned before, the Bayonetta series is a complex beat-em-up, meaning that combat is the core and central mechanic. So much so that the game's combo counter encourages the player to get creative and stylish with the game's combat system at dealing out carnage. This means that not only does the Bayonetta series have violence contained within it, it in fact celebrates proficiency in causing damage to enemies. Violence in gaming, as mentioned previously, is inescapable. It's just good and easy game design for setting up instances of conflict. However, what makes instances of combat stand out as culturally controversial or bad is the context surrounding that violence. In Bayonetta 2, players take control of titular Umbran Witch as she slays hordes of angels who usually attempt to get in her way of whatever her current goal is. In Bayonetta 2, she also faces off against the Legion of Hells, however, the angels remain the primary enemy type. No one has really pulled up Bayonetta and its sequel on its generous amounts of violence, as it's not exactly a typical or realistic behavior to slaughter the inhabitants of heaven. Thus, the context behind the violence has been technically given the cultural thumbs up. It's when the context given to the in-game violence has a context not deemed culturally appropriate or perhaps possesses no context at all. Examples being 2015 Steam game Hatred, which allows the players to enact mass shootings for no reason, and GTA 5, released in 2015, which, outside of the main story, easily facilitates and accommodates any random act of violence the player sees fit on NPCs. Hatred has been pulled from digital storefronts and was initially met with immense backlash against it. GTA 5 and the series as a whole often undergoes hot moral debates surrounding its plethora of controversial content, but ultimately Rockstar Games are let off the hook, with their games just ending up receiving higher ratings. Bayonetta's carnage, however, whilst being what some would call graphic and the spotlighted mechanic, has that fantasy element attached to it, and thus it can easily separate itself from any negative press. and thus it can easily separate itself from realistic and grounded depictions of violence, meaning the game doesn't garner any wanted negative press for its violence. Clearly, the violence in Bayonetta titles have been deemed acceptable, as even family-friendly Nintendo has picked up the series and made it one of their primary IPs. It's kind of a moot point to attempt to remove or boycott violence from gaming, as at its very core, gaming is a struggle to overcome some sort of obstacle, and 9 times out of 10 that means committing acts of copious amounts of violence. While there are many research papers arguing for and against whether gaming causes violence, ultimately it comes down to the individual and how impressionable and susceptible they are, which can vary for a number of reasons and circumstances. However, people are often alerted to the content within games before purchasing. Bayonetta and its sequel are both rated MA15+, meaning that the recommended age for playing is 15. Ratings here in Australia even list the mature content on the outside of the box next to the rating. Information about the game is also clearly outlined in the synopsis of the game on the box, giving buyers a fair idea of what is in the game. Games should not attempt to hide or mislead about the mature content contained within them, and consumers should know what they're getting into, so they are fully aware of the mature content in-game. It's no secret that there tends to be more male leads than female in the gaming industry. It's simply a mere reflection of the industry, as the industry tends to be often dominated by males. Because of this, the norm generally has the protagonist be male, and we view the world through their lenses. Typically, too, there would often be some sort of supporting character, with maybe a few of them being female. Having a female lead for a video game immediately sets the game up to stand out against the crowd. Most games with female leads often go on to garner a cult following or become extremely popular. A few examples would be Tomb Raider, now one of Square Enix's major properties, Mirror's Edge, PlayStation exclusive Horizon Zero Dawn, and Nier Automata, and of course, Bayonetta. And all of these have gone on to be incredibly financially successful, and all of these are recent titles as well. With games being produced today, it would appear that the gaming industry is becoming more and more progressive, thus we see more and more games breaking the pre-established mold. From that, we're getting to see more strong female leads in gaming. While Bayonetta's sexuality is clearly a foregrounded character trait throughout the two games, it is however not the only character trait she possesses. Often during cutscenes when Bayonetta summons demons to finish off her larger enemies, or in general gameplay when a Wicked Weave is used, Bayonetta's clothes tend to disappear and transform into skimpier versions of what she was just wearing. Oh, and there's more than enough innuendos to go around in the dialogue also. The plot justifies this by saying that her hair is her clothes, and when her hair is used to form a giant fist, naturally, because of this, parts of her clothes disappear. And this is where the debate begins. Is Bayonetta a feminist icon or another sex symbol? The argument in Bayonetta's case is often easily rebutted, as Bayonetta was indeed created by a woman. However, even with that argument removed, it only takes a small review of her character to see she is more than meets the eye. A character is only ever reduced to being a sex symbol when they are just that, and only that, a symbol of sex. However, Bayonetta's character is portrayed and shown to be a more complex character than that. Sure, the story is a little silly, shallow, and over the top, and most definitely takes a backseat to the gameplay, but Bayonetta's character is still shown to be layered and multifaceted. Bayonetta has been shown throughout the first game to be caring towards Cereza, although often begrudgingly, understanding of Luca's situation, and immensely irritated by Angel's getting in her way. Her sexuality is even portrayed in a positive light of sorts, depicted of more as a high level of cockiness and confidence than something that is used against her or something that defines her. In Bayonetta 2, we often see a lesser range of... In Bayonetta 2, we see less of an emotional range from Bayonetta, but we do see a strong sense of determination as she strives towards rescuing her fellow Umbran witch, Jeanne. In conclusion, the Bayonetta series wears its mature content loud and proud. Culturally, the violence contained in both Bayonetta titles have been okayed, as depictions of violence are far removed from realistic depictions of violence. To continue on from that, also her character is more rounded and does not